Your hand is on the bell, cold brass. Early morning, the kind of quiet that only exists at 0300 when everyone with any sense is still asleep. You don't ring it. You never did, but you've thought about it. More times than you'll ever tell anyone. More times than the record shows. There are men who stood exactly where you're standing and made a different choice. This is not their story. This is yours. Level 1. You're 19 years old and you're filling out a form with a pen that's running out of ink. The recruiter's office is in Louisville, Kentucky, third floor of a building that also contains a tax preparation service and a chiropractor. March, rain on the window, the kind of rain that doesn't decide whether it wants to be snow. You press harder with the pen. The man across the desk has forearms like bundled cable and a voice that doesn't waste itself on unnecessary words. He slides a folder across to you. You open it. The first page is a physical requirements chart. The numbers are specific. Ungenerous. You've been running since last June. Not on a track. On asphalt before school. In boots. Your left heel has a callus the size of a quarter that you've stopped noticing. Your hands know the texture of a pull-up bar, the way other people know a steering wheel. You've been preparing for something. You're about to find out if you prepared for the right thing. The physical screening comes back clean, not impressive, clean. The examiner marks your sheet without looking up. You pass by a margin so thin it has no name, 1 point above the cutoff. Stop, 1 point. There are 4 pages to the contract. You read the first 3 carefully. The 4th page has a paragraph near the bottom, smaller font, indented. You read it 3 times. The language doesn't resolve into meaning. You're not sure if it's legal language or operational language or something else entirely. You sign it anyway. Your mother thinks you joined the Navy. You let her think that. The bus leaves at 0600 Thursday. It doesn't go toward the coast. It goes toward the cold, toward the kind of wind that doesn't come from weather. It comes from geography, from a lake so large it generates its own logic. You sit in the 3rd row and watch Louisville disappear behind you. You don't know yet what page 4 means. You will. You're 20 years old and it's the Sunday night before Hell Week begins. 173 men sitting in a barracks that smells like salt and synthetic fabric and something underneath that. Something older. Collective dread has a smell. You know that now. You didn't know it a week ago. Nobody is talking. That's the thing nobody tells you about the night before. You expect noise, bravado, the performance of fearlessness. Instead, 173 men staring at their hands or their boots or the middle distance doing private mathematics, calculating what they have left, wondering if the number is large enough. You've been cold before. Not like this. The water off Coronado is 58 degrees in March. That number will stop meaning anything after the first hour. What it means in practice is this. Your hands stop receiving instructions from your brain somewhere around minute 40. You look at your fingers curling and uncurling in the surf and you understand, for the first time in your life, that your body is not entirely yours. The sand is the other thing. It enters every seam, every fold, every place on your body you didn't know had a surface. After day 2, it stops causing pain in certain areas. That is not an improvement. 6 boats launch, then 5, then 4. You stop counting boats. You count men. There's a man in your crew named Whitfield. Not the fastest, not the strongest. He never complains. Not once. In 6 weeks of training, not once in a single evolution. You notice this the way you notice structural things, load-bearing things. Whitfield's silence has a quality to it that's different from everyone else's silence. His is not suppression, it's clarity. On the 4th night, he's gone. Not to injury, his body is intact, his scores are sufficient. He walks to the bell at a time you don't witness and makes a decision you won't understand for another 16 years. You don't know that yet, you just know he's gone. The class that started with 173 men reaches graduation with 29. A trident is pinned to your chest. The instructor does not use a backing. He presses it through fabric, through skin by hand, looking directly at you while he does it. You don't look down, you don't move, because you understand now what the bell was offering, not failure, a different life. You chose this one. The question that will follow you for the next 30 years is whether the choosing ever actually stops. You're 22 years old, and you are carrying 67 pounds of gear through terrain that was designed by geology to exhaust human beings. Kandahar Province. 2011, not the valleys of the north, with their watched ridgelines and vertical everything. This is flat, open, the kind of flat that feels exposed the way a table feels exposed. Nothing above it, nothing beside it, everything visible from every direction. The threat here doesn't come from high ground, it comes from below. Your senior chief's name is Okafor, 17 years in the teams. Born in Lagos, raised in Bakersfield, built somewhere in between those two things into something that doesn't have a clean geographic explanation. He does not explain his decisions, he issues them. Early on, you make the mistake of asking why about something small. A route choice, a timing call. He looks at you for 3 full seconds, then he continues walking. You learn faster after that. The kit stops feeling like 67 pounds after day 3. It begins to feel like a second skeleton. External, load-bearing, part of the system. The first time you take it off at the end of a patrol, you feel structurally wrong. Too light, unanchored. You put it back on before you sleep. Being invisible is not failure. Being invisible is the job. The day someone sees you is the day something has already gone wrong. 3 months in, during a clearance operation in a compound outside Maiwan, you find something in the second room. Not a weapon, not documents, something else. Something that doesn't belong to the operational picture you were given. Something that raises a question nobody briefed you to ask. Okafor enters the room behind you. He looks at it for 4 seconds. His face does not change. He signals you to leave it. You leave it. It never appears in any report you read. It never comes up in any debrief. Okafor never mentions it, and you understand without being told that you won't mention it either. You still think about it. Not obsessively, just occasionally. The way you think about a word you can't quite translate. 6 weeks later, Okafor hands you a water bottle after a 14-hour patrol and says, "You're starting to read ground." That's it. 6 weeks of work condensed into 5 words. You drink the water and say nothing because there is nothing adequate to say, and Okafor is already walking away. You're 26 years old and you have learned to sleep with your eyes 30% open, not a metaphor. 30%, literally. The eyelid drops to a precise angle that allows low-level light input while the brain cycles through something adjacent to rest. You discovered this accidentally on your second deployment. You've refined it since. Your body does things now that you never taught it, and adaptations that occurred without your conscious authorization, filed quietly into the operating system while you were focused on something else. You are no longer becoming something you already are. 3 deployments behind you: Afghanistan, Iraq, a 3rd location that appears in no official record you will ever be cleared to read, in a region where the local name for the nearest town has 6 consonants, and no comfortable entry point for an American tongue. Full mission profile, direct action, special reconnaissance, personnel recovery, counterterrorism. You know which tool fits which problem. You know how fast to switch when the problem changes shape. The mission in the Anbar corridor runs 11 seconds. Door. Stack. Signal. Move. 4 rooms, 2 stairwells, 11 seconds of compressed geometry and controlled velocity that your nervous system processes faster than your conscious mind can narrate. Then it's over. You sit in the vehicle afterward for 20 minutes. Nobody speaks. You look at your hands on your knees. They are completely still. You're not sure when they learned to do that. To be still after 11 seconds of everything. It happened the same way the sleep happened. Quietly, without announcement. The processing comes later. It always comes later, always at 0200 in the specific silence that exists between one day ending and the next, one not yet having a shape. What they train you for is speed. What they don't tell you, what can't be told, only accumulated, out is that speed means it ends before your mind has time to hold it. You execute, you debrief, you sleep 30%, you execute again. There is a moment, just one, lying in a hide site you built yourself from debris and patience, watching a target building through glass from 200 meters, breathing like oxygen is a resource you're rationing. You think about a 19-year-old pressing a failing pen into a form in Louisville, Kentucky. You think he had no idea what he was signing up for. You think neither did you, and you've been here the whole time. You're 29 years old and you are watching a man named Garza do everything slowly. Not hesitantly, not poorly, slowly. With a deliberateness that looks to the untrained eye like caution. To your eye, but 3 deployments, 4 years of reading human beings under pressure. It looks like something else. You're not sure yet what to call it, so you watch. Garza is not fast. In a community that measures everything in seconds, in split-second decisions and compressed timelines, Garza operates at a pace that makes certain people on your team visibly impatient. You've heard the comments. You filed them without responding. 6 weeks into a training rotation in the Nevada desert during a simulated direct action, Garza does something small. He pauses half a second, no more. At a threshold where every protocol says a move, where every instinct trained into you says move, Garza pauses and processes one additional piece of environmental information that everyone else, including you, has already discarded. That piece of information in the real version of this scenario is the difference between the team coming home and the team not coming home. You don't say anything to him afterward. You think about it for 3 days. Speed wins firefights. Patience wins wars. You spent 4 years perfecting the first one. You spend the next 4 quietly dismantling your certainty about it. The thing you're learning, the thing that doesn't appear in any training manual because it can't be systematized, is that your strength is no longer the point. Your strength is infrastructure. It exists to be transferred. The man next to you, the man behind you, the man who will be standing where you're standing in 6 years, he needs to inherit something functional, not impressive. Functional. You pull Garza aside one evening after chow, not to correct him, to ask him what he saw at that threshold. He explains it in 2 sentences. Simple, precise. The kind of clarity that only comes from someone who has thought slowly about a fast thing. You listen. You don't speak for a long moment. Then you say, "You'll teach that, not to me." To the new guys, exactly the way you just said it. Garza nods once. He does. 3 months later, you deployed to a joint exercise in the Philippines and come back speaking less than when you left. Your team notices the change in you. Nobody mentions it. That's how you know it's real. You're 33 years old, and your most important skill is one that leaves no evidence. There is a lieutenant on your team. You don't use his name here because his name is not the point. He is 26 years old, well-trained, genuinely intelligent, and operating with the particular confidence of someone who has studied the thing extensively without yet having been broken by it. He is not arrogant. That would be easier. He is certain. Certainty in a junior officer is not a character flaw. It is a developmental stage. Your job, the job that no manual describes and no course teaches and no performance review captures, is to shepherd him through it without him knowing he's being shepherded. You do this by letting him be right when he is right, loudly, clearly, in front of the team. You do this by steering him when he is wrong in a direction that makes the correction feel like his own thinking, arriving slightly ahead of schedule. You never take credit. You don't need it. A mission comes, no name, no mappable location in this telling. What you have is this: 72 hours, 4 personnel, no air support, an intelligence picture with 2 confirmed gaps and 1 suspected one. The lieutenant makes a planning decision that is logical, well-reasoned, and wrong. You know it is wrong the way Okafor knew things. Not from the briefing materials, but from the accumulated geometry of having been wrong in similar configurations before and carrying the arithmetic of those mistakes forward in your body. You say nothing for 8 minutes. You sit across the planning table and you let him work. Then you ask one question, not a correction, a question, the kind that opens a door and then steps back so the other person can walk through it themselves. He walks through it, he revises the plan, the mission runs clean, the debrief credits his planning. It was his planning. You just asked a question at the right moment in the right direction. On the flight back, you think about Okafor walking away after 5 words. You think about Garza's half-second pause. You think about every person who handed something to you without making you feel the weight of the gift. You understand now what they were doing. You've stopped counting deployments. You've started counting the men still standing because of something they learned inside a conversation you barely remember having. You're 38 years old and you are the answer to questions nobody has written down yet. Senior Chief Petty Officer. Fewer than 200 active duty SEALs hold this grade at any given moment across the entire United States Navy. You are one of them. The younger chiefs call you before they call the manual. The officers request you in planning sessions when the problem has moved past the territory that training covers. You are the institutional memory now. That means you carry the mistakes too, all of them, including the ones that weren't yours. You've watched men leave, injuries that compounded past the point of return, burnout that arrived not dramatically, but incrementally, like water finding a crack, widening it quietly over years. Families who waited with a patience that had a limit nobody announced until it was reached. You don't judge any of them, you've done the math on all of it. One evening after a brutal training evolution, a young SEAL sits across from you. His name is not important right now. What's important is his eyes. The particular flatness that arrives when a person is asking themselves a question they're not sure they want answered. He's not asking you to fix it, he's just talking. You listen for a long time without moving, then you tell him about Whitfield. You tell him about a man who was the clearest thinking person in your Hell Week class, who rang the bell on the fourth night, not because he broke men, but because he understood something about himself that most people spend a lifetime avoiding, that the right choice and the hard choice are not always the same choice. Whitfield runs a trauma recovery program now. You know because you found it yourself years ago, late at night, searching for something you couldn't name. He didn't reach out. You didn't either. Some things don't require a conversation to be resolved. The young SEAL across from you is quiet for a long time after you finish. Then he goes back to work. You don't know if he stays or goes. You know he made the decision himself, with full information, in full possession of who he is. That's all anyone can give anyone. You're 43 years old, and the man challenging the standard is someone you trained. That's the part that makes it complicated. He is a junior officer, sharp, decorated, someone whose career has your fingerprints on it in ways that never appear in any official record. He comes to you with a proposal, measured, documented, built on legitimate data about attrition rates and training costs and pipeline efficiency. He has done the work. The argument is not careless. You listen to the entire thing without interrupting. Then you ask him to give you 3 weeks, not because you're resistant to change. You've changed more things in this institution than most people know, quietly, from the inside, over 24 years of patient pressure. You understand that systems must evolve or they calcify. But you also know something the spreadsheets don't know. The standard is not a filter. The standard is the whole architecture. A man who has not been broken by something real, genuinely broken, past the point where performance and willpower can compensate, will eventually meet something real at a moment when the men around him need him to have already been through it. The breaking is not the obstacle to the job. The breaking is the preparation for it. You spend 3 weeks preparing a counter brief, not to win, to protect something that cannot walk into the room and speak for itself. The proposal is tabled. You take no satisfaction in the outcome. What you take satisfaction in is smaller and harder to explain. The knowledge that 20 years from now, a man in a situation with no good options will make the right call because something inside him was stress tested at 22 in cold water with no sleep, and he came through it knowing exactly where his floor is. He'll never connect it back to this meeting. You don't need him to. There is one more thing. Late that night, alone in your office, you take out the original copy of your enlistment contract. You find page 4, the indented paragraph, the small font. You read it. You finally understand what it means. You've been living it for 24 years. You're 47 years old, and the title on your door has stopped feeling like a description. Commander, Naval Special Warfare Squadron, Operational Readiness, Strategic Deployment, Human Welfare. That last phrase is the one nobody prepares you for. Human welfare. It sounds administrative until you're sitting across from a family that has been waiting for 3 years for something they were never fully told they were waiting for, and you are the senior person in the room, and what you say next will either hold them together or it won't. You are responsible for hundreds of people, not just SEALs. Intelligence analysts who work 20-hour days in rooms with no windows, processing signals, data that would give most people nightmares. Logistics specialists who solve impossible supply problems at 0400 with no acknowledgement and no audience. Medical staff who carry what they see home with them every night in ways that don't show up on any readiness report. People who will never wear a trident. People without whom the trident means nothing. There is an analyst on your staff. She's 24 years old. Her name will not appear here by design, because what matters is not who she is, but what she does and what you do with it. She identifies a pattern and signals data pulled from 3 separate theater commands. Subtle. The kind of thing that requires a particular quality of attention, not just intelligence, but patience. The willingness to sit with ambiguous information long enough for it to resolve. Her supervisor hasn't acted on it. She comes to you directly. You read her analysis in 11 minutes. You elevate it through the correct channels within the hour, with her name attached, her methodology documented, her conclusions presented as hers because they are hers. The pattern proves accurate. The intelligence shapes an operation that succeeds. You ensure the credit reaches her in writing through channels that cannot be quietly reassigned or absorbed upward. Someone asks you later why you did it. You don't find the question interesting. An organization that doesn't accurately reward accuracy will eventually stop producing it. That's not philosophy. That's engineering. You've been in uniform for 28 years. You no longer measure what you sacrificed to be here. You measure what you were able to build because you stayed. You're 52 years old, 1 star, Rear Admiral, lower half, Commander, Naval Special Warfare Command, thousands of personnel, dozens of concurrent operations distributed across multiple continents, a budget that would have seemed fictional to the 19-year-old pressing a failing pen into a form in Louisville, Kentucky. You brief the Secretary of Defense on Tuesdays. Your phone receives calls at 0300 that you cannot describe to anyone outside the specific room in which they are discussed. You have stopped being surprised by anything. That is not cynicism. That is the terminal result of having seen enough of the full range of human behavior. The worst of it, and the best of it, and the vast ordinary middle of it, that surprise requires a new category. And new categories are rare. It is an otherwise unremarkable Wednesday. You've taken a call. It's resolved. You're walking back to your office through the compound in the specific silence that exists between the end of one problem and the beginning of whatever comes next. Your feet take you somewhere your mind didn't plan. You're standing in front of the bell. The same bell, cold brass. Early morning. Your hand moves before you instruct it to. The metal is exactly as cold as you remember. You're not sure when you last touched it. You're not sure it matters. You think about Whitfield. The fourth night, the clarity in his eyes that you misread as defeat and spent 16 years reinterpreting. You think about Uckifer handing you a water bottle and saying 5 words. You think about Garza's half-second pause that you almost coached out of him. You think about the lieutenant walking through a door you opened by asking a single question. You think about every man who rang this bell and every man who didn't. And you understand, but not for the first time, but for the first time with this particular quality of stillness, that neither choice was simple. Both choices cost something real. Both choices were made by people doing their best with the information they had at the moment they had it. The bell was never about quitting. It was about knowing yourself clearly enough to make the right choice for the right reasons at the right moment. That's the whole thing. That's all of it. You walk back to your office, 14 messages waiting, 3 marked urgent. You start with the first one because that's what you do. You started by standing on a line. You learned to hold it. Now you draw it for others, and the work continues.